I have been one acquainted with the night. I have walked out in rain and back in rain. I have outwalked the furthest city light. I have looked down the saddest city lane. I have passed by the watchman on his bait and dropped my eyes, unwilling to explain. I have stood still and stopped the sound of fate, when far away an interrupted cry came over houses from another street, but not to call me back or say goodbye. And further still, at an unearthly height, one luminary clock against the sky proclaimed the time was neither wrong nor right. I have been one acquainted with the night.
The prompt we decided to address asks us to explain how formal elements such as structure, diction, and imagery reveal the speaker's response to his depression.
We hypothesize that through the use of a terza rima structure, shifts in tone, alliteration, imagery, repetition, and irony in the title, Frost is able to show a response to the speaker's depression.
A terza rima is a type of poetry structure that consists of 3-line stanzas, most commonly in iambic pentameter. The middle of every stanza rhymes with the first and last lines of the next stanza, and the last stanza is a couplet that rhymes with the middle line of the previous stanza. This follows an ABA, BCB, CDC, DED, EE pattern.
As you can see in line 1 and line 3 of stanza 1, night and light rhyme. Line 2 does not rhyme with the other lines in stanza 1 and instead rhymes with lines 4 and 6 of stanza 2. This follows the ABA BCB pattern all the way to the end of the poem where the right and night words rhyme. This fits the theme because the flow of the rhyme scheme in a circular pattern mimics the repetition of events and depression in the speaker's life.
The tone shifts with each stanza. The first stanza has a lonely tone because the speaker is walking alone as he isolates himself from the society around him. The second stanza has an ashamed tone. The speaker drops his eyes while passing by the watchman in order to avoid having to explain himself for being out late at night. The third stanza has a hopeful tone because the speaker hears a call and hopes that it is for him. Then, in the fourth and fifth stanzas, the tone shifts to a sorrowful tone. This is because the speaker realizes that the calls are not for him and he is alone still.
Besides these shifts in tone, there are 2 other main shifts in the poem to be noted. In the first line of the third stanza, where the speaker says, "I have stood still and stopped the sound of feet," the alliteration used calls the reader's attention to the situation of the cry that the narrator hears through the repeating letter S. The tone shifts very suddenly in this spot from ashamed when he encounters the watchman to hopeful when he hears the cry and hopes that it is someone calling out for him. The second main shift is in the last stanza of the poem with the rhyming couplet where the speaker says, "Proclaimed that time was neither wrong nor right, I have been one acquainted with the night." In this couplet, the last line of the entire poem is a repetition of the very first line of the poem. This emphasizes the line showing how the depression of the speaker is ongoing.
The first image occurs when the narrator states that he has outwalked the furthest city light. Here, you can clearly visualize the speaker walking away from society. By walking past the lights, the speaker shows that he is not afraid of the dark, or in this case, his depression, but instead he is familiar with the feeling. Another image that stands out in this poem is the image of a luminary clock against the sky. We think that this represents the moon, and when the speaker looks up to the sky at his luminary clock, he realizes that time is unimportant in his life at that moment. As a result of his depression, the narrator does not care about time because his life is a constant repetition of his dull sadness.
In addition to the repetition of the first and last line in the poem showing the ongoing nature of the speaker's depression, there are also other components to the poem that show this repetition. In stanzas 1 and 2, each line starts with "I have." This constant repeating of what the speaker has done shows that he is very familiar with the feelings of depression and signifies that this has become a life routine and a norm.
Based on the word acquainted, the original impression is that the narrator has some familiarity with the night, but also does not know it well. The poem seems to have darker themes and deals with complex feelings such as sadness and depression. After an analysis of the poem, it becomes apparent that the choice of using the word acquainted is ironic. Clearly, the narrator is not just acquainted with the night. He has made this walk many times before, considering that he has walked out in rain and back in rain, and has outwalked the city lights. These two lines suggest that the author knows the city pretty well and what to expect out on his walks. Also, the feeling throughout the poem of depression and loneliness is also familiar to the narrator. He knows that the sound is not to call him back or say goodbye, suggesting that he is not expecting the call to be for him. Lastly, the fact that the poem starts and ends with the same line shows the circular pattern of the narrator's lifestyle and the familiarity with depression and the night. Based on this, it can be assumed that the title is meant to be more ironic than initial interpretation.
In the poem Acquainted with the Night, Frost is able to show a response to the speaker's depression through a variety of poetic elements. He starts with the terza-rima structure that shows repetition, which emphasizes the loneliness and depression of the speaker and mimics the continuous pattern of depression in his life. Then, Frost uses shifts in tone and alliteration to show the changing emotions of the speaker through his journey. Next, imagery and irony are used to illustrate the isolation and loneliness caused by the depression and the familiarity with depression.